Ladies and gentlemen, welcome and good evening to all of you. My name is Bernhard Winkler. I'm the moderator of tonight's event, and it's called Populism, Propaganda, and Pop Culture. And we're gonna discuss the connections and the interdependence of these three words. And we will focus mostly on right-wing populism. So we maybe also will talk about the other side, but the focus will be on what we also called mythologies of right-wing populism. And we will ask a lot of questions that we try to tackle tonight, like what language and symbols does the right-wing populism use? Why are they so successful in Europe right now? How do they use technology and social media? Why do so many young people find right-wing ideology attractive? And what are, that's going to be in the introductory lecture of Mr. Stiglegger, the mythical roots and thoughts behind their claims. So we're also going to dig a little bit deeper here. And what language do they use? And how do they instrumentalize media and pop culture? So this is one difficult connection that we try to discuss tonight. And in what ways is disinformation also used in social media from right-wing ideology? Okay. It's a pressing matter. So as you can hear, I'm German, and in Germany we had elections just a few weeks ago, and what we would call here right-wing populist party, AfD, they got over 20%. So this is something that is very vital to discuss right now, I would say. And it's always difficult to find a definition of what is right-wing populism and of what is far right. And sometimes we will try to not really define, but to come closer to these definitions, because there are some definitions and we might talk about them, but I don't want to overload you at the beginning, because we will have a lot of information on that also in the lecture and then in the discussion. Okay, before we dive in, I want to say thank you to all of our partners, to the Embassy of the Federal Republic of Germany, to the Austrian Cultural Forum, the Goethe-Institut, the DAAD, and the German Department of Filozofska Fakulteta. And of course, Tankario Dom for hosting us. Thank you very much. And our interpreter that you cannot see, Branka Božić, she's sitting behind and is translating everything we say into Slovene. Okay, and before we begin, I would like to give the word to Louis Mourier, the cultural attaché of the Embassy of Germany. Please.
Hi, good evening. And Bernhard basically already said most of the stuff, so I don't want to take too much of your time. And usually I also always ask ChatGPT to provide some creative input when I prepare these short speeches. But for that event, it was very easy and very obvious, because literally every day on social media, we can see how populists are using pop culture for political ends and for promoting disinformation. And you mentioned it, Bernhard. Just take the recent German parliamentary elections that took place exactly 4 weeks ago. During the election campaign, we have seen extremist parties using music, memes, short videos to basically appeal to young people and to blur the difference between fact and fiction. And in one very prominent case, we've actually seen far-right parties reformulating the lyrics of a very famous party song in Germany and turning it into a party song full of hate speech and ressentiments against foreigners. And with that song, they were actually quite successful. A few weeks after it was released, you could hear the song in clubs, in folk festivals, and of course on TikTok and Instagram and social media. And I think the example, it hints to a broader point that we see across Europe. We can see how parties on the political fringes are getting more and more traction among young people. I mean, I'm 30 years old, and many people from my generation are actually voting for extremist parties and are being more and more drawn to populist pop culture and populist disinformation. So that all of that leaves a lot to discuss for our panel today, and of course to the lecture of Mr. Stiglegger. How exactly do populists use pop culture to mainstream their ideologies in social media and of course across society? What does that mean for the future of our liberal democracy? and how can political forces from the center regain traction among young people? Very difficult questions, but we have a fantastic panel. Thanks again for all the support, and I'm looking forward towards the discussion. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Louis. Very short to the structure that we're doing tonight. So first we will have that introductory lecture from Markus Stiglegger, and then we will have the discussion here in the panel with Anuška Delić and with Gregor Moder. And afterwards, we're going to open it also up for the audience. So you can also discuss with us if you are interested in that one. Okay? So first, for introduction, we have on my right side here Professor Dr. Markus Stiglegger. He teaches film and cultural studies at the University of Freiburg and the Münster School of Design. He received his doctorate with the dissertation called Sadiko Nazista, Fascism and Sexuality in Film. And he habilitated in 2005 with the monograph Ritual and Seduction, where he developed the seduction theory that many of my students know already. He writes regularly for film magazines such as Filmdienst, EPD Film in Germany, and founded the magazine Ikonen. And he's also a musician. He writes screenplays and runs the podcast Projektionen. Markus Stiglegger. I'm going to introduce, ich mag die anderen zwei noch.
Ach so.
Ja. I'm going to introduce to my left Anuška Delić. She's an investigative and data journalist who leads a two-headed micro-regional non-profit journalism center called Ostro in Slovenia and in Ostro in Croatia. She's also a Balkans regional editor with the Organized Crime and Corruption Reporting Project. And she also established the MEPs project, which brought together journalists that represent all EU member states. And as a member of a lot of global investigations, such as the Panama Papers, Paradise Papers, FinCEN files, and the Laundromats, she's a co-recipient of several awards, including the Pulitzer Prize on Explanatory Reporting. Anuška Delić. And we have Dr. Gregor Moder. He's a philosopher here in Ljubljana and a colleague of mine. He studied philosophy in Ljubljana and he received his doctorate in 2009 with a comparative thesis on Hegel and Spinoza. During his studies, he also worked as an actor and as the artistic director of theater projects. And he spent research stays at the Jan van Eyck Academy in Maastricht and at the universities of Cambridge and Princeton. And Moder is a lecturer here in Ljubljana and he specializes in political philosophy, metaphysics, ideological criticism, and the philosophy of art. Gregor Moder. And now we're gonna start with the introductory lecture of Professor Stiglegger. Markus, bitte.
So, thank you very much for having me, and it's a great honor and pleasure to be in this town for the first time, actually, and I've been enjoying it for 2 days now, and yeah, I'm talking about something from the German language background, so I will have to translate some things. It's a context from German and Austrian right-wing tendencies connected with pop culture, and it is connected to one of my research interests, which is the combination of mythology and popular culture and film culture. So all of these things will appear in my presentation. It has to be short, but I will still show you 2 clips and start with one of them, which is one example of an ultra-right-wing German hip-hop song, which gives you an impression how pop culture and right-wing messages are combined in this context. Mind the symbol here, I will refer to that later.
ein Herz, Paris ein anderes, London, Madrid, Berlin und all die ganzen Städte und keine Panzerkette, keine Naturgewalt, kein Wutanfall der Welt konnte sie hier auseinanderbrechen. Diesen Quell dieser Welt, diese götterhafte Schöpferkraft, die Legenden, die von Helden erzählen, dieses Kleinod, diese Wiege der Erde ist heute scheintot und liegt invalide im Sterben. Was die Ahnen einst erschufen, mit Blut, Schweiß und Tränen, voller Leidenschaft und Geisteskraft in Hunderten von Leben ist erschunden, verschwunden in wenigen Jahrzehnten, verraten und verkauft von seelenlosen Hyänen. Ich sehe romanische, gotische, klassizistische Bauten langsam zerfallen zu nem toten, abgerissenen Haufen und alle Werte, so wie Ehre, Stolz und Identität sind herzlos entfernt und aus Geschichtsbüchern draußen. Europa weint, Europa schreit nach dem Ende der Wende. Es ist an der Zeit zum Verteidigen des eigenen. Macht euch bereit und reicht euch die Hände in Einigkeit. Das junge Europa muss aufstehen, aufdrehen, rausgehen, die Faust heben, bis es alle anderen auch sehen. Tochter des Phönix, entsteige der Glut. Du musst leben, du bist unser heiliges Gut.
Okay, this is an example of a right-wing German hip-hop song by the project called Komplott, which is originated in Halle. I will come back to this city as well. And as not everyone will have understood the German lyrics, it's a requiem for Europe, for this idea of Europe that is presented here. Europa cries, Europa screams, after the end of the turn, time is up to defend what is your own, be prepared, join hands in unity, young Europa must rise, tune in, go out, raise the fist till everyone will see it. So this is the refrain of this song, and it gives you an idea of the references where this band works with, and it's more a project. It's not a band because it's one guy, basically. This is a music project which is strongly connected to the identitarian movement. The identitarian movement in German, it's identitäre Bewegung, so the abbreviation is IB, not IM. And what this is about is what is called Fortress Europa in this context. And I use the phrase Europa in contrast to Europe to signify this certain idea of this right-wing idea of Europe in this certain context. And what you will see here, or what you see here, is basically the symbol, which you already saw in the beginning of the video, which is the lambda symbol in a circle, the black and yellow coded context on the flags. And you will see a lot of young people which are not really like identifiable as connected with certain subcultures that some people might imagine as radicalized subcultures. So some of those people look fairly average and unspecific. So this logo is really interesting because it derived from the so-called Spartan logo from a film especially, and a comic. I'll come back to this later. But as you can guess, the Spartan logo is connected to the film 300. But this will be later. So this is the official symbol of the identitarian movement in the German language and also in the French language context. And we can also discuss which connections there are in Eastern Europe, for example. And here you see the yellow and black combination. This symbol also is often connected with an historical context as the emblem of the SA, the Sturmabteilung of the National Socialist Party in the 1930s. It is similar, that's obvious, but this symbol is forbidden in Germany. So it's forbidden to show this symbol. So probably the reference is there, but it's the actual source of the symbol on the right of the Identitäre Bewegung is actually the shield of the Spartans. The combination of black and red, which is the signature color code of the identitarian movement also is reflected in what is called, or was called, is still called the Proud Boys in America. It's a male-based right-wing movement which also strongly supported the Trump cult, and which is curiously founded by Gavin McInnes, one of the founders of the Vice magazine. Gavin McInnes is one of the original icons of hipster culture. He is a post-punk guy, and he coined a certain style, which you see here. And he was also the first guy who took the Fred Perry shirt, the black shirt with the yellow wreath, as a symbol, as this new color code for his new movement. But later he distanced himself from the Proud Boys. So the Proud Boys stayed, and he tried to get in a distance, but he is still right-wing active. So, but not in this context anymore. There's a connection also, which seems interesting to me, is I already referred to like really average young people, and you see here, for example, a young woman displaying the IB symbolism with a Denmark context, and it can appear like in this militaristic context as a patch on this bomber jacket, but it is also very like innocent looking on some like a blue t-shirt, for example, which is quite interesting because it works more on the level of pop culture than on the level of subcultures. There's a difference today between these. Here is the ideology sources of this movement. I mean, there are many, and I chose the obvious sources. The Decline of the West by Oswald Spengler, Der Untergang des Abendlandes, is a book from the 20s, which is relevant for this context. Also, the more esoteric writings of Julius Evola, Revolt Against the Modern World, from the 30s, is still relevant as a more like esoteric identitarian right-wing volume. And also Armin Mohler, which might be more well-known in Germany. He used to be the secretary of a German writer Ernst Jünger, also a cult figure in the right-wing movement. And Armin Mohler is well-known for his doctor's thesis, Die konservative Revolution in Deutschland, the conservative revolution in Germany, because the idea of a conservative revolution is one of the ideological basis of this new right movement, which is not referring directly to neo-Nazis or Nazi ideology. It's more connected to this alternative ideas of right-wing ideas from the 20s and 30s. So the phrase Occidental culture is replacing, in this context, a word like race. So they try to stay away from the idea of being racist, and so the idea of the identitarian connection is more made via the Occidental, so like the Occidental culture aspect. And the aim is to invoke a cultural clash between Occidental and, for example, Oriental cultures. The ideological sources are further in the later years in the writings of Alain de Benoist. It's a French writer who began writing in the 80s and founded the Nouvelle Droite movement in France. And his ideas were directed against globalization, against multiculturalism, against Islamization, and against non-European migration. So it's really familiar right-wing thinking here. But he also has the idea that there is cultural Marxism. You will hear this phrase of cultural Marxism with a lot of popular authors, also in America. And Jordan Peterson refers to cultural Marxism, for example, as well. So this is also mentioned by Alain de Benoist really early here. He is for a European nationalism and for a cultural homogeneity, which then was formed in reality in the so-called Bloc Identitaire in 2003. And this is basically the beginning of the identitarian movement as a European, also youth-related culture. Most people don't know another connection which refers back to 1968, which is the concept of Euro of 100 flags. But I mentioned this because I found it quite interesting. It's born from the spirit of 1968 by the Breton nationalist Jan Fauré. And he proposes new borders in Europe based on the model of the Middle Ages, like territories, the Basques, the Bretons, the Flemings, and so on. So he wants a new structure of his idea of Europe, and an ultra-regionalism and European federalism instead of nationalism. So it's not the same, obviously, as the idea by Alain de Benoist. But it's still ethnically homogeneous and historically evolved regions, and about a post-liberal pan-European network, which he is aiming for. And a kind of multiculturalism from the right. This is multiculturalism in a European Occidental sense, of course. No? And so not really diverse in this idea, but based on this idea of the regions, as he says. So this is a more obscure source, but it is referred to here and there, so I mentioned it as well. The identitarian movement in Germany began in 2012, and so we have the town, which I already mentioned, in Halle, Germany. Halle is a university town, and it is well known that key figures of the identitarian movement were studying politics and media studies there. So a lot of these ideas, which are formed into video clips and TikTok reels and so on, are based on actually having studied these things. And they are connected to the Institute of State Policy, Institut für Staatspolitik, in a town in former Eastern Germany called Schnellroda, which was founded in 2000. And this is actually a kind of ultra-right-wing think tank. So this think tank is a source for the youth movement, identitarian movement in 2012. So it took a long time from, you have the 20s and 30s ideas of the conservative revolution, you have the 68 and the early 1980s with Alain de Benoist, and then 2000 and finally 2012, the really pop culture related phenomenon. The key phrase is ethnopluralism, the idea that ethnic groups are not differentiated biologically, but according to cultural groups. And so this is called racism without races from the outside, and even criticized for that, of course. But it is kind of like another turn on this idea to camouflage the idea of the ethnically homogeneous idea of culture, and to promote it. So the superiority of certain cultures is not claimed, but the unchangeable cultural identity is underlined in this context. So the values are tradition, homeland, family, culture, people, state, order, and beauty. These are key concepts which appear all the time, and it's also the key concepts connected with all right-wing tendencies, so it's really close in this sense. But their actions are different. Actions by the identitarian movement are more occupation actions, flash mobs, or the storming of cultural events. So they infiltrated theater plays, which they didn't appreciate. They occupied the Berlin, the Brandenburger Tor in Berlin, and they unfolded like their posters and flags. And so it's more of a popular activism, a youth-oriented activism. And their goal is the remigration as they call it, of illegal immigrants or the unassimilated immigrants. So the word of remigration has been established and even is present in the program of the AfD now. So we have 20% voting in Germany for a party which overtook the concept of the right-wing institutions for their own real politics. That's quite remarkable, I think. So what is also interesting, the word remigration is obviously taken from exile research. So it's not meant originally in that way. It was actually the return of people persecuted by the Nazis to their former homeland. So it was a completely different idea of remigration connected to this word, and now it's kind of kidnapped as a new context. The identitarian movement is not aiming for direct political actions and party activities, but more on meta-politics. Meta-politics is another very important word here. They want to have less of a concrete impact on party politics, but rather to influence it indirectly by triggering social debates. So placing a word like remigration is one of those goals, like placing the words, the concepts in the bigger context of the society. And they were formed into reality by the AfD, obviously. Also, there's another concept like the Defend Europe action, which was some years ago when they were driving with ships in the Mediterranean Sea to directly fend off migration boats. So that was kind of a direct action they documented on video and so on. Direct reference, and now we come to the background. That's the final part of my presentation. The direct reference is here to the myth of Sparta and the so-called 300 warriors defending Sparta against the Persian invaders in the comic by Frank Miller, 300. So this myth of the 300 Spartan warriors is the idea to identify with this mythology, to have an image of the invasion which has to be fought off, and the idea of the fortress Europa, which arises from that in this idea. So 300 is a kind of role model, and the lambda symbol, as we have seen, is the symbol of the Spartan elite fighters in the film. There's a small minority, like it's identifying with this small minority, defending itself with contempt for death against an army of thousands of enemies. So there are thousands of enemies trying to get into the country and being fought off. The Greeks and Spartans against the Persians are seen as synonymous with Europe against Africa and the Orient. So Occident and Orient is again the model, the fight for Occidental culture against the foreign influence. And the aim is a cultural, spiritual revolution. This comic by Frank Miller has a lot of this imagery and symbolism, and is also a foundation of a new tendency of right-wing comics in Germany by a publishing house called Hydra Comics. And they are using this more realistic comic style to shed a revisionist light on German history, for example. And they have a Yukio Mishima comic, a comic about a nationalist Japanese artist and writer. And so this is also connected to the comic world, but there's also a lot of stereotypes in the film 300, which is can be seen in images I will show you. Xerxes, the Persian leader, appears larger than life. He is really big and gender indifferent, which is very important here because gender indifference is one of the enemy images here. Characteristics of decadence are also there with body adornment, free sexuality, and zoophilia. So it's all you can imagine connected with the image of the enemies. And there's in the identitarian movement, a battle for the language. The queer movement is an explicit enemy in this context. The body is an enemy if it is weak or non-normative. it is rejected. The glorification of the athletic and martial normative body is the ideal. And there's also real activities connected to the identitarian and the new right in Germany. For example, the Battle of the Nibelungs, der Kampf der Nibelungen, which is mixed martial arts fighting contests. I suppose a lot of you have seen 300, but I will show a very short clip of 2 minutes, and you'll have all the elements in one very short sequence. You'll see.
Now that's a bit of a problem. See, rumor has it the Athenians have already turned you down. And if those philosophers and boy lovers have found that kind of nerve, then...
We must be diplomatic.
And of course, Spartans have their reputation to consider.
Choose your next words carefully, Leonidas. They may be your last as king.
And water.
Madman. You're a madman.
Earth and water. Well, you'll find plenty of both down there.
No man, Persian or Greek, no man threatens a messenger.
You bring the crowns and heads of conquered kings to my city steps. You insult my queen. You threaten my people with slavery and death. Oh, I've chosen my words carefully, Persian. Perhaps you should have done the same.
This is blasphemy. This is madness.
Madness. This is Sparta!
All right, I think it's a very well-known scene, actually, and it's highly meme-related. So the film is from 2006, so it's not really new, but it reappears in this context. And what we've seen here, I'm coming to an end. What we've seen here is gender indifference as a threat. We haven't seen that in that scene, but here is an example. This is the non-normative body of the enemy. We have the enemy in this scene as the African-based person. Then we have the emperor. We have the homeland, the family, like the heteronormative idea of the family. We have the young warriors, the wife, like the heterosexual normative relationship, and we have the death sentence for the enemy. And this is really like, this is pure, like, first in the comic, then the film. It's like someone has fulfilled the wet dreams of this identitarian mindset. So it is a very popular narrative. Popular, not popular, no, I don't know. The development of right-wing pop culture with the emergence of the internet communities brought forth the meme culture connected with this film and other examples. But there are also various music genres like pagan metal, neo-folk, singer-songwriter, right-wing singer-songwriter, and right-wing hip-hop, which also refer to this film using samples and elements of the mythology in the lyrics. And I already mentioned various media which are used in the identitarian pop culture, like comics, music videos, memes. Examples from this context are a Complot, that was the first band I showed you, Chris Ares. Both are not active anymore, which is quite interesting. So these projects mostly exist for a very short time. They are used for certain purposes, and often, like Chris Ares, who was a very successful right-wing musician in Germany, he really completely withdrew from this context, and I think he's now a wedding photographer, if I researched that correctly. There is also Runa. Runa is a female rapper, obviously, and she uses popular. We heard this in the introduction as well. She uses popular melodies and refers to them, but gives them a right-wing twist then. And then we have Hydra Comics, which published those identitarian comics. And Galsta, for example, is more of a pagan idea of hip-hop, which is like, it sounds crazy, and I wouldn't have believed it myself like 15 or 20 years ago, that there will be something like a ultra right-wing pagan hip-hop. Yeah, but it is there, and you will find it. I will not show it now. So I mentioned Complot. I don't have to go into this really deep. If you see the one CD cover by Complot, Weißes Kaninchen Weiß, is written with SZ to refer to a Jewish name version of Weiß, and also white, obviously. And then we have the White Rabbit, which is also referring to a pop cultural thing, not only the Alice in Wonderland, but also the Matrix films. I think it more refers to the Matrix films in this context. And so this is actually a published CD. It's not only like today, it's mainly in Spotify and online sources, but it's actually... And Complot also has a song, which I can shortly refer to. Sparta muss leben. Sparta has to live even if we have to die, according to the law, so that our children can inherit. This is kind of the really right-wing idea. And if you check out this music on YouTube Music, for example, this is the graphic which you will find. It's the lambda symbol. It's from the comic by Frank Miller, and there's a strong connection. So for me, the idea to focus on the film 300 is caused by the fact that it reappears all the time. And we have something which is really irritating as well, Kollega. He is basically not considered a right-wing musician, but he also has criticism based on his anti-Semitic conspiracy theories. And as you see here on his record, Nero, and in the video, actually, he presents himself like Leonidas in 300. Yeah. Kollega is also a hip-hop musician. To come to the end, what we see here is a myth transformation. It goes from history, like the Battle of the Thermopyles, via the mythical narrative, via the media transformation, via comic, into film, and into a right-wing pop culture. The political reception and adaptation functions via memes, symbolism, pop music, and self-representation in public appearances, but they are rare. Like it is obvious that Complot doesn't want to show his face, so there's a lot of mask playing here. It's a mixture of mythical motifs, symbolism, and political ideology and self-portrayal, which gives us this new image of this new right pop culture. And the effect, that is my final idea here, is a seductive broad impact through the familiarity of the motifs and narratives, dying for the consensus to establish a radical ideological fragments. So the idea is that this actually works. And I know a lot of people, not from the academic background of people studying cultural sciences, because obviously those people made other choices in life. But when I talk to teachers of like 15 to 17-year-old young people, there is a huge openness for these ideas and this imagery. So this is something we can based our discussion on, probably. And I'm really curious to hear what are your experiences or your ideas about this. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Markus, for that rich insight. There was a lot we can talk about, and I'm sure there will also be a lot of questions from the audience. We're going to do that a little bit later because we now try to comment on that and also broaden the topic a little bit. Anushka, I would like to start with you. Okay. It was not, yeah. Is there anything like that identitarian movement that Markus described in Slovenia, in Croatia, or in that area? And if there is there similarities, differences, and do they also have a certain way of using pop cultural symbols and music and movies and stuff like that?
Yeah, hi. Definitely we do also have the identitarian movement here, but I have to say that maybe lately it hasn't been as active as it was a few years ago. Similarities, I mean, it's pretty much the same, copy-pasted onto the national context, right? So the narratives are more, of course, national specific, but the gist of the matter is what Markus was explaining now. But we have a long culture of the sort of extreme right here, and it's been very it's been flexible, so it quickly merges into like new groups that pop up and seem to be kind of fringe groups vying for a word in the public debate, but they're actually neo-Nazis. For example, we had the yellow vests that were not actually yellow vests, but were neo-Nazis dressed as yellow vests, right? So it's like kind of a permanent carnival. So, but the point is that they exist, but they just change colors, right? So whatever is, let's say, modern, that's what they will do. I haven't seen those, like Ostro, which I run. We have a fact-checking department, and we fact-check a lot of disinformation, misinformation online in the media, etc. So my experience with what is produced as like right-wing disinformation today more revolves around that. But I have to say that I haven't really seen a lot of like pop culture, except lately when there's been a rise in kind of influencers on the political right that have become carriers of these narratives, whether it's, you know, the value of the traditional family, or, you know, the women should spend less time working and more time at home reading children, or, you know, the fear against the other, etc. So it's, as we say here in the Balkans, the same thing but different package.
Okay, so you would say they're
Same
they're,
thing, very nicely put. Yeah, the same thing. Bravo.
So they're in disguise basically, and they just adapt to the changing circumstances.
Yeah, and they're also very much connected to the political side of things here, right?
But there is nothing, because you said there are also some, you would call them neo-Nazis.
They are.
Yeah, but they don't really show that by their. You said they had the yellow vests, yes, but it was like a mask for them as well. That there is nothing like, let's say, like the skinhead culture of the 90s or something.
That's been long gone.
Yeah.
I mean, that's, you know, been 25 years and more since they realized that they need to look like the average Joe and Mary, right? Yeah. Or here it would be Maria and Jože. So they have, you know, it's clear that today it's not only if you're a neo-Nazi, even if you have other kind of different, alternative confidential agendas, you want to appear like everyone else, right?
Okay.
And so if on the right, the identitarian movement is what is hot right now, that's then what they will do, right?
Okay.
But so they just change with the wind.
Okay, that's already one insight, I think, on the strategy that are working there. Okay, Gregor, I would like to ask you, because we already had the things like identitarian. We talked about neo-Nazis. We said, are these right-wing populist parties, like in Germany, the AfD, the FPO in Austria, the Rassemblement National in France, would you say they're just right-wing populist party, or is there a kind of fascism involved already? Would you call these fascist parties? Because in the AfD we also have like one wing of the party, they say they are fascist, others are not. Or is that a word that we cannot apply here, you would say?
I think this is a very important question. Thank you for inviting me, and thank you, Marcus, for this interesting, horrible but interesting presentation. I think it's a very important question to ask. Okay, these are the characters that you showed us are clearly fringe characters of European society. I don't think that they compose anything close. I might be wrong. I hope I'm not, but I don't think they compose anything close to 30% of the voters that happen to have voted in favor of the Austrian right-wing party, or 20% of voters that voted for German right-wing party. I think there's a discrepancy between these radical fringe elements, which use any kind of values. Who doesn't like a family? Everyone likes a family. I mean, how is that not a value that we all stand behind, right?
The right kind of family.
Well, I mean, what we've seen is just family. I mean, family can be whatever. Everyone has a family, some sort of. Even people in the convents, they have some sort of family. It's fine. So family is good. Who doesn't want to? What man wouldn't want to look like the Spartan heroes? I mean, come on. Let's be clear, these are okay values. There's nothing wrong with these values themselves. But it's only the fringe elements that will then accept that as a policy that needs, someone needs to die. We need to find people to murder now and deport and stuff like that. This is very fringe. There's nothing there's nothing that connects, I think, the radical actions that Marcos was describing, things like, people actually, I don't know, in the end, even sacrificing their health and life, maybe, to go to to prevent a certain boat to land in a certain area in Europe. I think this is ridiculous. Like, you have to be a little bit crazy to even do this, right? I mean, this is not normal course of action. How does that translate to 30% of votes in Austria? I don't think it does directly. And your question was about whether we can directly call them fascists or not, these parties. I don't think, I mean, I've looked in preparation for this discussion, I've looked at a couple of, what's the consensus? What do people think? Are we already seeing fascism or not? And I'd say that what Marcos was describing, you can probably just call it fascism. It's masquerading, but it's probably just fascism. But these parties, it's not so clear. The consensus, as far as I've been able to see, is that this isn't quite fascism yet.
Yeah.
This is the consensus. So the yet is part of the consensus. It's a step in that direction, but it's not exactly that. But can I ask actually something that came to my mind as I was listening to your talk, Marcus, which is, what role do you think United States have to play in this? Because you were saying that you referred to the German context, but it seemed to me that even when you showed Complot, he was hip-hopping. He was using black American gang-style culture to promote message simply because it's cool. How is that? Then you showed us Sparta clips, which, sorry, did you want to intervene? No. The Sparta clips, which on some level, yes, they are very comic booky, But on another level, I mean, I can think of thousands American movies, like thousands of American movies, which feature one, strong, undressed male American, like, or Schwarzenegger would be a good example, right? Killing thousands of Orientals, just with one gun. I mean, this is a very typical American style. You have one, Superman. Let's talk about Superman. It's like literally translation of Übermensch. How is that possible? That you take, poor Nietzsche, and then the Germans, the Nazis would translate Übermensch into their sort of like masculine ideal, and then Americans just accept that. Yay, we all like that. How is that possible? So this is like, how do you? The question would be, how do you see the United States culture in relation to the German context?
I think what you described, and really rightfully so, because the film 300 is made by Zack Snyder. Zack Snyder is a director who also did Superman vs. Batman, Justice League, Rebel Moon. Yeah. Rebel Moon is also the idea of, they are rebelling against the totalitarian system and like this fascist leader guy, but with a fascist counter-revolution. So the values they have are really folkish, like they are farmers in a science fiction film. So on Netflix you can see Rebel Moon. I think Zack Snyder is a very good example to the indifference that the American idea of culture and domination, how much it is connected to these fascist core. And you probably have to fear that one day there is one guy coming up, being elected and trying to get all the power the president can have. It happened. So you already have this dark core coming to the surface, and for sure he is connected to the Proud Boys and says, stand back but stand by. And all these things are really, so the American idea, which comes from the philosophy of the frontier mythology, like the living on the border between culture and nature, which is the idea of the frontier theory, they went from barbarianism directly to a kind of decadence, skipping I'm not anti-American, I have to say. I've been teaching there and so on, and I enjoy a lot of American culture, but basically it's going from the barbarian status of society to the decadent status at the moment, obviously, with the abuse of power. And so I would agree that also in what I presented, there is a lot of fascist mythology and a lot of fascist values, but it's still kind of abstract. It's more of an idea. And it has to be set into action by a certain party and a certain party leader. And parts, as you mentioned, Bernhard, parts of the AfD have such a leader, obviously. And so it can become actual fascism. But until then, it is this potential. The core is already like that. So yeah, I agree. But I think there have to be different conditions to bring this actually to life.
They have to.
Since we started with America now, I just want to ask one question. I'm not sure for whom it is. I guess you can work together in that. What role and what connections are there between right-wing ideology and that tech capitalism that we have in the United States? So like Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, we have
Peter
we
Thiel.
talked about Peter Thiel. We talked about him as well. What are the connections between those, right-wing and tech?
Agreements. Yeah, right now it looks like a little bit rushed but happy marriage. We saw this on inauguration night. The entire world saw it. So we'll see how that develops. But right now, I think what this means is definitely a big, well, should have been already years ago, but at least I hope that Europe is waking up now. because, for them, for the tech oligarchs, what is at stake is literally just money, investment, business development, and of course, for some of them, world domination. But for everyone else, through their activities, through their policies or the policies they're trying to enforce on everyone else, it's actually all about the freedom of speech, right? So in that sense, it's quite an interesting connection between an ideology that is starting to step on that stepped or seemed to have stepped on the train that says American Constitution and American view of the freedom of speech, which is absolute, is the way forward. And on the other hand, we have Europe, where we kind of like our Charter of Human Rights, by which my freedom of speech is limited by Gregor's rights or your rights. For that, I think this connection that we're talking about is extremely volatile. And actually, for me, the way I see it, it really all boils down to that, to freedom of speech, and that will then whichever side wins, quote unquote, and it's probably going to be the other side because Europe is too slow and doesn't have the money and the power of a superpower administration behind it. We'll see, but it's a huge test for Europe. I think we should be thinking more about that than about what they actually want, because they mean business, and they came to enforce that business with lots of incentives.
Okay. Would you want to add up?
A more philosophical side of things.
No, Marcus, you had one thought on that one, or tech and right wing? I just maybe to add up to what you just said. So you think it's just about the money, and there is not
it's regulation or whatever, but essentially at the end of the day, it's money. I mean, we can also talk about all the details that it's about for us, for regular people, for the implications for the democratic public debate. But essentially, it boils down to that, right? Because some of you or all of you know that Mark Zuckerberg announced in January. He woke up from a long New Year's party and announced that Meta will cancel all fact checkers in the United States. And now this is a huge test for Europe. Will it allow this? Because it allows it for Elon Musk already. Community notes, no fact checking. So all of a sudden, oligarchs, platform owners are no longer responsible for what takes place. So all of a sudden, the interpretation that freedom of speech is absolute is kind of gaining ground and vying for victory. And if that happens, then we're all going to be less fortunate for it, right? Because we're going to be even more, what's the word? Drowning in disinformation and misinformation.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Marcus, you wanted?
Yeah, there is an apocalyptic philosopher called Nick Land, and in his writings, he's known for the Dark Enlightenment, as he calls it, and also for the idea of acceleration. So what we see in the combination of these tech aspects and the new fascist-like politics is an acceleration in destroying the usual system which we could handle, and replacing it really fast by something else. So what we see in America is actually this acceleration at work, and there are forethinkers like Steve Bannon, who used to influence Trump in the beginning, and then they fall out with each other, but Steve Bannon is still on Trump's side, obviously, and he is often interviewed about this, and he is for this idea of changing it really quickly, destroying all existing values and systems, and then being able to replacing it by something completely different. And so Nick Land was kind of this dark philosopher who advocated for this, actually. So you find intelligent people who are for this. It is shocking in a way, but it is like that. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Gregor, do you know any other thinkers that might be, doesn't have to be philosophers, but like people who are giving theory for the right wing? Because he was talking about that Nick Land that I did not know, for instance. But are there any people that you could?
Quite honestly, I never even read Mein Kampf. So I'm a bad identitarian. If you I'm really bad at this. I think the only person that is kind of missing is the other part of Europe, the eastern part, the Russian side. There would be this guy called Dugin.
Dugin, yeah.
Who mixes, I think, a lot of which is going on and is pretty much the same, whether it's American produced, Russian produced, or German produced. It's all the same, Slovenian produced. But I think that Dugin emphasizes the Orthodox religion as something that is specific to Russia. But apart from that, I think, again, I haven't even read Mein Kampf. So, I mean, I'm that ignorant and that sort of like, I really hate this type of literature. So I don't go into it. But other than that, I wouldn't really, I wouldn't mention any other big names. But on the topic of Nick Land and the whole question of technology, what role does new technology have to play? I think we have to separate a little bit two levels. This is what I wanted to add. And the first level would be that it's already known that the current technology and social media is used in elections. Like the recent most that I know of that a student of mine who comes from Romania was very passionate about is TikTok in Romanian elections. Apparently, it was completely abused, and just for spreading his charisma, if you want, over TikTok, so really short visual messages, he managed to come from complete anonymity to something like, was it 20 to 30% of vote in Romania? And apparently some Russian intelligence, whatever, was involved, and the Supreme Court, the Constitutional Court of Romania, decided the elections to be annulled. Anyway, so that's one level. So we already know that we already know that we do not know how TikTok works. Maybe some Chinese people do, but we don't know. And we don't know how Facebook works. We don't know these algorithms. And a lot of those algorithms is left to algorithms themselves. So it's possibly that no person knows what it's doing. Probably not, but it would be possible. But that's still just one level. The second level would be the question of technology is that what has already happened and the potential for technology to play even bigger role in what we call liberal democracy is that I think Anuška was already mentioning the question of the public space for discussion. It's vaporizing because we are constantly only relating to others through our phones, which already means that the way we can we get information, the way we get basic attitudes to things, the way we get affects to whatever is happening, is mediated through phones, basically, and algorithms that are, even more reducing the society that exists into atomized individuals that can then be nudged into directions which are sometimes, bought and some other times just decided by algorithms. So this is another thing that I think threatens the idea of a rational discourse that I think is essential to a liberal democracy. If we don't subsume to the idea that a rational discourse is possible, then democracy doesn't really have a sense.
Okay. One of the big questions that we also had in the introduction and that we also might work together on is why is that right-wing ideology so popular for young people? So because also maybe the first one to Marcus, because I thought about, do you think that it's also something like creating a counterculture or breaking taboos or something like that, to be against the mainstream and seeing these sometimes violent and other kind of pictures, just to be different to what we would call mainstream culture as a youth, for instance?
This could be one aspect, especially because it was taken as a given fact that counterculture is basically left-wing. And at a certain point, it had to switch in a way. Especially at a point, I think this is connected to the conscience of historical aspects, facts, and to history in general, because we are now really far, like 80 years away from the Second World War, and things connected, for example, to the Shoah and the Holocaust and so on. And the consciousness is not really elaborate at the moment. I have a lot of students studying film, for example, who have not really seen the film documents from like when the camps were liberated, for example, which is essential. You have to know these images, and because they are like a kind of antidote to certain ways of thinking, because it coins your image archive. And if things are mentioned, you see that. You have to see that. But if you have never seen it as an image or film or anything, it is not present. So you are open to other things, and they get in this place. And I think it is the fact that there is not a real historical consciousness which drives a certain generation away from these ideas. In contrast, they are driven towards it because it gives you a sense of identity. And so this is called identitarian movement. I mean, this is for a reason. And we also have identitarian tendencies in self-proclaimed left-wing groups as well. And this is very complicated. So if you get deeper into this, you see a lot of things which are bordering on levels which they are not even conscious of, where they get similar and have very similar values sometimes. And but this is, but it's sometimes it's totally different. But I think there's a longing for this idea of identity, and whoever fills this longing will have an advantage in this moment. And I think that has a lot to do with the availability via TikTok. So there is the fight for who is seen first or at all on TikTok. It's a real problem. If you ask, how can you fight populism? You can not find it with rational thought, obviously. That's a huge problem. Yeah? And it is, it makes us, clueless how to deal with that, because populism can only be fought with populism, with counter-populism. And this is not really satisfying as a result.
Okay, what are your thoughts on this one, especially on the last one? We can only fight populism with populism.
Go.
I think that's a very good point, and I'm very happy that Marcus showed us the reference to this extreme right-wing subcultures, cultures, whatever, to popular culture and to images, stories, and films, comic books. Why? Because I think ultimately, I mean, you can be cynical and say that Kant's idea of enlightenment and Jürgen Habermas's expansion of the idea in the 20th century, the idea that ultimately, I'm going to repeat what I said earlier, that all liberal democracy rests on the idea of people having a reasonable discussion and then, deciding on action based on their rational self-interest. If only ever it was that simple. Now, of course, you can argue that never in the history of liberal democracy have things been that simple. And you'd probably be right. It wasn't that simple. But I think we've reached a point in time where there doesn't seem to be any discussion at all. people usually, I mean, we're doing pretty well, actually, to be quite honest. But I think most of the public discussions end up being flag waving. So if it's a controversial issue, people will just wave flags. I'm for this camp, and the other will say I'm for this camp, and people will cheer, and that's it. That's not a rational discussion. Yeah. And obviously, in that kind of context, I think it's very clear that images and films and music are going to function so much better than, people lecturing to you about what is morally right to do, about what is important in your life. When you grow up, you'll need this advice that grandfather, am giving you. No one will want to listen to that. Okay. Even if it's a radical right-wing hate message described as a Black American hip-hop culture thing, you'll still prefer that to grandfather's advice.
Anuška, you?
Yeah, you mentioned now hip-hop, and I immediately remembered the first song, and I wasn't sure if I should do this or if I should not do anything.
That's the problem.
Well, because you didn't know the lyrics, so let's be very clear why.
But no, I wanted to respond to or reflect on the statement "fighting populism with populism." I mean, if I like transpose it onto like my sort of area of expertise, I don't know. Fighting disinformation with disinformation is really a bad idea. But I have been seeing it a lot, actually, especially during COVID on the left in Slovenia as well. And, was also getting arguments back, like, why are you sharing that? It's bullshit. We told you it's bullshit. Sorry. See, I cursed. And the answer was, well, they do it, so we have to do it too, right? And for me, that's problematic on many levels. Like, it just exacerbates the problem and continues the status quo, and we have even less of a public debate that people can use to actually form informed viable opinions to then go to elections or referendum or whatever. So that's a huge problem actually in this way. Also, it doesn't offer any solution. It actually shows that the left, despite decades of a trend, was not able, and still to this day is not able to form a response that would counter this. And actually, it appears to be so bad that today we are talking about whether we should fight disinformation with disinformation or populism with populism, right? Because we have no answers.
Yep.
Or we have lots of answers, but usable, viable answers that can actually be operationalized, not so many. So I think that's where it actually lies here.
Answer for that one?
Yeah, absolutely. That was what I was hinting at. The idea populism can only be fought by counter-populism is not fulfilling in any way. And it probably doesn't lead to a good result. So I'm totally with you there. I still think it is very important to know the text and the sources. It's not even important, the sources of these ideas we are talking about. It's not even important to know Mein Kampf, actually, because Mein Kampf does not really appear. I didn't mention it. It doesn't really appear.
I was wondering why Mein Kampf is not important.
Because these people, the new right, tries to stay away from Nazi ideology. They don't consider themselves Nazis. They are the alternative right-wing group that refers to Oswald Spengler and the idea that the West is falling and how can we save it, for example, contrary to Spengler, who said the West will fall anyway, and China will rise. And on the other hand, for example, Ernst Jünger, who really despised Hitler. And so there is in Germany, there's a strong right-wing tradition of thinking which is totally anti-Nazi, but even more totally anti-left. And so they refer to different sources. And I just wanted to add this because it's important to know these sources, to know the thoughts, and to be able even to discuss these things. Yeah. So because I had one student, actually, only one student ever in my career who was open to these conservative revolution ideas. And it was a lot of work. And he was referring to, in coming back to me because he knew I know the texts. Yeah. And he found himself at home. But I said, I don't share your ideas. I just know the texts. But this was probably one step more, which was needed. So I could give him some hints into another direction. Today, actually, he had a coming out later. And now he is like actively gay, which is not in contrary, actually. It's not contrary to having right-wing ideas. Unfortunately, we know that as well. But it's quite interesting. It's not many
not that
people.
You mentioned this. I have a sorry, Bernhard, but I have a straightforward question for this. Now that you mentioned sexuality, and this strikes me as interesting as well, because I mean I was not very young when I watched 300.
Yeah.
And the beautiful male bodies that are constantly on display seem to me to be, yes, okay, you describe them as heteronormative, but necessarily so. I mean, we also know that, especially the Sturmabteilung, I think there was quite a lot of homosexuality there, right? And the whole Nazi imagery of, again, naked. They were naked, though. This is... anyway, so...
Not in America.
So, again, male, masculine bodies, in unison and so on, they seem to be very close to homoerotic.
I mean, this is a very classical theory that a certain insecurity in connection with sexuality is connected to right-wing thinking as well. Very classical theory, actually. And you find this as well in the 20s and 30s in theoretical writings by Hans Blüher and so on. And you will also find it in the New Right. There is definitely a gay open tendency, and also in German neo-Nazi context, you will find people like Michael Kühn, who actually later died of his AIDS infection. He that was in the early 90s, actually, but he was probably one of the most influential neo-Nazi figures in Germany. So there is a connection to a lot of these things. And it's funny because you mentioned that my doctor's thesis was on fascism and sexuality in film. Because in film, you find a lot of connections, especially in the 70s, when there was this sexual liberation from the late 60s, and then you had the influence of psychoanalytical thinking and so on, and films like The Night Porter and like Visconti's The Damned and so on, they really dealt with it, and even Salò by Pasolini. And so this connection is really strong, you are right, and I think 300 can also be considered a cult film in homosexual communities, for sure. Yeah, but the funny thing is, I think there's also a reading of this as being anti-queer. It's also open to this. And I said that Zack Snyder, the director, is really indifferent to these ideas because he mixes it all the time. And he even has made a children's film about fighting owls. I don't remember the title now. It's like a remake of 300 with owls, like an animated film. And they want to be fighting owls.
Oh, sorry, but what is an old?
An owl. An owl, like this bird.
Oh, sova.
Sorry,
okay.
an owl. Sorry. So like warrior owls. And so they even have the Spartan helmets in the film. It's really crazy. And so he's really indifferent about all these things they can abuse. And I think he just doesn't give a shit about this.
Okay, I would like to open it for the audience because I'm guessing we have a lot of questions also on a lot of, yeah. Do we have the microphone for the... Yeah.
Cheers. Thanks a lot. Hi, I'm Bernd. Thanks a lot for those terrific insights. I have a question for you that's been bugging me for like about 2 years. Before coming to Slovenia, I was posted in India. And in India, you also have right-wing nationalism. And one evening, I was sitting with your sort of average Joe, 60-year-old male, let's say not very highly educated, but averagely educated. And he told me about basically their own replacement theory, and like Muslims are taking over the country, and Hindus are going to be in the minority sooner or later. And okay, I guess makes sense. There have been issues for quite some time. But then I asked him, so who's behind it all? Who does that? And I expected the response to be some Indian politician or some Muslim cleric I'd never heard of. And he told me, yeah, well, it's Bill Gates and George Soros. And I was like, how the heck does he even know about George Soros? And how come George Soros is so busy to be corrupting each and every country in this world? So can you tell me how an Indian far-right theory also has the same villains, and they don't even come up with their own villains in their own theories?
Thank you. We did not talk about anti-Semitism yet, so this is a good cue, I guess, for you to answer.
Who was it?
Did you mean to address it to someone specifically, or should we just decide?
I don't know, whoever knows the answer.
There you go.
The Indian specialist.
So conspiracy theories and anti-Semitism, how is that connected?
Well, I mean, yeah, I would like, I don't know why, but I already started. So, yes, there's anti-Semitism for sure with in the case of George Soros. But I'm also thinking that, I mean, someone should say that these people are immature or insecure or just idiots quite often. I mean, this shouldn't be under,
But that doesn't matter, though. But
Yeah.
it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
They
if they're
still
idiots.
have the vote.
They still have a loud voice, and it still travels. And the social media will make sure that it travels and reaches people. So it doesn't matter if the entrance information is stupid. Do you know what I mean? It doesn't matter.
I would say, sorry.
No, it's you are right, of course.
Oh,
I would say it's very important that conspiracy theories can be reduced to very simple, basic ideas. And they function, and that might be a kind of answer, they function very well when they deal with established ideas, which don't have to be explained. And if you have certain names which come as icons for certain ideas, and you combine them in a similar way, it might work better than if you don't use that familiar names. So I think familiarity and convention work really well. And it's not just the names and figures, it's also certain elements which also reappear. For example, if you take the QAnon conspiracy, which was so important for Trump, for the Trump cult as well. This is already connected to anti-Semitic conspiracy theories, the vampirism idea. So the vampire as a conspiracy figure is then just taken from Jewish identities to like Hillary Clinton in this certain context. And it even works in popular culture narratives. Someone who is not really like problematic, Stephen King. He is really anti-Trump, as we know. But Stephen King has written the novel Dr. Sleep, which is so close to the QAnon idea of children being enslaved and adrenochrome being taken from them, this vampiric conspiracy idea. So I think the key is the familiarity of this model. And you can easily refer to that, and even cross cultures. Maybe this is a hint to that.
I don't know.
And I guess in general, all these ideologies usually they're based on emotions, on negative emotions, on fear and anxiety usually. Fear of somebody is taking something away from us, like our work or our women or something like that, or our honor, or children, or something that is dear to us. And therefore they just need to construct an enemy, I guess. And it's a very easy way to go over stereotypes and just take something that is already floating around and something to construct someone that we can blame on, because life itself is too complicated and we just want to melt it down to one thing that we can blame. This is one meta-analysis, I would say, for this one. But of course, it's not always working like that, but this is one strategy, I guess, that is behind a lot of that, the construction of an easy enemy that you can blame.
I want to improve my answer, if you'll allow me. Go ahead. Anushka's criticism got me deeply, so I need to improve my answer.
I was about to speak now.
Then...
No, please do, because I have already interrupted.
We seem to be a comic duo, Anushka.
I know. Sure. We should sit very much separate.
Anyway, the improvement would be this, that we've been discussing anti-Semitism, but there was also Bill Gates, right? So that's not a case of anti-Semitism. I think that's a case of anti-global elitism. And I think this might be the actual answer why, Soros, apart from being of Jewish origin, is also a billionaire and has interest in,
Actually, his son does now.
The game. Still. And there's the vaccines. I think Bill Gates gives a lot of money to African countries, to help improve vaccines. So vaccines plus global elite and a lot of billions, that's already a problem. I don't know what's with the vaccines. Like, I don't have the answers why specifically vaccines are bad. Why not cars or phones? But I think phones are also bad.
Yeah, I think the vaccines are invasion into the body, which is a primal fear.
Right.
Yeah? So something gets into your body, and that's the...
Anushka?
Yeah, now there's a primal fear of NGOs because they get under your skin and into your mind.
That's Soros.
Right, but I think what we're also maybe, I don't know, I just got this idea from Gregor's response to my criticism, that maybe it's also about kind of elite replacement, because like those that were funding or perpetuating the status quo that has been running everything, right? Those need to be replaced also, and new philanthropic endeavors have to be established, and maybe this whole charade seeing with the U.S. foreign aid, etc., in the past weeks. Also, kind of this indeed is a sort of a nuclear bomb in the NGO sector globally, right? This everything that happened. You don't have to have American funding for it to affect you. So what I wonder is like where this money is going to go now. That's going to go in the right hands, right? So will that be like new, disinfo portals? Will that be, funding what you mentioned earlier, like very short-lived pop projects that will convey certain narratives and so forth, right? What we are not asking ourselves enough. We were mentioning sources earlier, but when I hear sources, I think of other things. Right now, I'm thinking about financial sources. Who funds all this? Are we talking about that? Is anyone looking into it? Mm-hmm. So I think there's much to do here. There was another point, but I forgot. Maybe Gregor can help me.
We had another question, I think.
Yes, you mentioned Superman before, and I actually did a lot of research on that. So basically, you have a lot of movies that were made to be left-wing. They Live by John Carpenter, for example, and the Matrix movies, who were usurped by the right wing and taken to mean something else. And no matter how hard the authors are trying to say, but that's not what I meant, this is what it means now. Mm. And Superman is an example, one of the few examples of it working the other way around. So you've mentioned the Nazis take Nietzsche's ideas, and then two Jewish high school kids take Nazis' ideas and make it do something different. They make the idea, the comic book about a hero who fights for the little guy. In the beginning, Superman actually assisted in those early comics, like the creation of unions against evil capitalists. You had that. So they started off with that, and Superman basically was an anti-Nazi figure and anti-capitalist even at first, but that didn't take long. However, after World War II, there was a really interesting idea where the American radio stations and the Department of Education, I think, funded a run of radio plays that were Superman fighting the KKK. And that lasted, I think it lasted for about a year or half a year or something, but it really took KKK out of business. They lost a lot of popularity with that because Superman beat them. So yeah, about Superman. So that's that.
Thank you very much. It sounds very interesting.
Who wants to answer the Superman?
I would like to add one thing because I happened to edit a book on John Carpenter just like 2 weeks ago. It came out in German. And we actually interviewed John Carpenter about conspiracy theorists from the right-wing era adoring his film They Live. Because They Live, as you probably know, the Earth is infiltrated by invaders from outer space. And if you wear certain glasses, you can recognize them. And you see that the messages on the walls, they mean something different and so on. And I think basically this film can be read from the left and from the right. And that is a reason it is really popular and widespread on the one hand. And John Carpenter, obviously, he says about himself, he's a short-time pessimist and long-time optimist. And he wouldn't probably consider himself being leftist because, for example, Kurt Russell is really right-wing. And he made this film Escape from New York with him, which is also has a left-wing reading as it came out. And but he is quite comfortable with the left-wing idea of his films. And so he considers himself an outsider in Hollywood, basically. So it's still not considered to be an idea of gaining success with spreading left-wing ideas with the films. But yeah, just what I want to say is that They Live obviously is a film that works for both sides. And probably that might be the reason it is still known very well.
Okay, we have time for one last question.
Hi, thank you for being here today. So please answer me this. How does it come for 30% of voters with such a simplistic logic, cognitive dissonance, smart use of general illiteracy of younger population caught in technological escapism, which might generate a sense of entitlement and nihilism and so on, to a mainstream ideology, to the, I don't know, to the 90% of voters and so on and so on. How does it come from this 30% of extremists, right wings, to that?
I think I was saying something to that point earlier. Should I?
Yeah.
I think what I was saying was that the Nazis neo-Nazis or neo-fascists or whatever, or proto-fascists or identitarians, they compose much less than 30% of voters even. But then 30% of voters in Austria or 20% of voters in Germany, and I'm not sure about the percentage in other countries, vote for the parties that seem to represent similar or adjacent ideas. And yes, that is the question, as you know, Hamlet would put it. How does like a fringe radical idea become so mainstream that up to 30% people can vote for it? And then luckily, I think in Austria, they have decided to, for now at least, keep them out of government. That is the question. But I think there are many answers, and I don't think we have time enough to list them all. But the one that I would possibly mention would be that a lot of those votes are negative votes, in the meaning I am dissatisfied with the conservatives, I am totally dissatisfied with the communists or whatever they call themselves these days, I hate the Greens because they're not to be trusted, and so I'm gonna, just out of spite, I'm gonna vote for these idiots who are clearly idiots, but at least they don't pretend they're not idiots.
Yeah.
These are, I think there's a kind of like there's a lot of negative logic behind it. And I think people are then actually happy that their party is not in government.
Yeah.
this specific type of voters. But there are many other reasons.
Yeah, thank you. I totally agree on that with you, on that negativity as a basis. I think we've found a few strategies at least, and could decipher a few of the symbols and of the ways that these right-wing ideologies work. We were still not completely clear about what to do against it. I think we had some different views on that. That's going to be your homework, so you can think about that. What we're going to do against it. Louis, you have.
I'm very sorry. I'm just taking the privilege because I'm part of the not the organizers, but
yeah.
Anyways, I'm from the German embassy, as I was saying in the beginning, and I think the discussion was fascinating, really insightful, but it leaves me unhappy still a bit. Because you were all mentioning you can't fight populism with populism, and during the part, how do we get back the young people, how do we get them back into the political center, how can we gain traction with them again? It was kind of a resignation. I was even feeling that on the panel that we don't really know the solution, so I don't know. And I'm coming from a big political institution, the Federal Foreign Office, and we're the ones supposed to getting traction with young people. And if you can't tell me how I am supposed to do that, whoever will then? So I'm asking one question. Please tell me one way how we can gain traction on social media with young people.
Well, we were just talking about a lot of negativity, right? So maybe we just need a hippie renaissance.
Yeah.
Not really. Not with that on. No, but I'm serious. I mean, halfway serious. I don't know what the response is, to be honest. I'm also much older than you, so I'm way beyond, help. But I don't know. Except for that, I really don't know. And I really do think that maybe people just need actual hope that there is something better on the other side. But I don't know how to convince them that hasn't been pre-produced, pre-programmed by, Soros, etc. Right? So it's a chicken and egg dilemma. I'm sorry.
So there is one thought from Walter Benjamin where he's talking about fascism is aestheticizing politics, and that's maybe the problem, because that's what the right-wing parties can do. And if we want to stay on the good side, and if we want to be rational, we cannot go that far. And maybe they're in this one, they just use this thing that makes them fascists, basically. This would be one thing to think about it. Because we said at the beginning, how would you advertise rationality and being in the middle? Because especially these algorithms that we were talking about, they are after emotionality, about diversity, going in different directions and things like that. And that's what the center parties want not to and should not do, I guess. So I don't know, but this is one problem that I see there, that aestheticizing of politics, that is something that is already at home there in some way.
I tried to say something before, I think, and I would like to repeat it in a way. I think it is also a question of education, because I see it as a duty for my function teaching it in universities to keep the discussion on these things alive, because I see a lot of colleagues resignating actually and shying away from these conflicts which might appear. But it is even more today, it is important to keep discussion alive, and I keep showing these examples, keep showing all kinds of these sources and discussing them. It's not much which I can do, because I reach a very, very limited amount of people. That's a problem, probably. But I hope that I give them some impulses which they carry on. And some of them probably will carry on educating other people. So that's the only thing I can do personally. And writing books, obviously. And hope that someone will read them.
Did you mean to suggest less tanks and more education to the Republic of Germany?
Why not?
I think that's a good thing to suggest.
But I think it's also hard to expect that something rational would come out of the political arena, which is now an irrational circus. Like, how are you gonna? It's hard to envision that, right? And you can't really redo the entire circus, right? The politics today, unfortunately, has become a circus. The politics is happening over social media. Trump announced who's somebody that they will annex onto social media, so how do you derive something irrational out of that? I don't know. And I'm sorry to keep you, you have to sit here and, leave with a bad taste in your mouth, but I don't think we have the answer that you're looking for.
So maybe this was the first step. We could maybe do some more on that and just follow up with events like that, because now we kind of identified what's the problem. Maybe next time we're going to come to more solutions. Thank you very much to all our panelists and to the audience and everybody who helped with doing that event.
Stayed.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.